Imagine walking down a city street. To you, it's just this incredibly hostile environment.
Right, highly stressful.
Exactly. You're noticing the broken glass on the sidewalk,
Mm.
the shadows stretching out from the alleys. You're seeing the defensive body language of the people walking past you. Basically, you are experiencing a dangerous, threatening reality.
You're on high alert.
Right.
Huh?
Now imagine another person walking down that exact same street at the exact same time, but they notice the vibrant street art on the brick walls. They smell the bakery down the
Yeah,
block.
yeah, totally different focus.
They see the potential for community in all those crowded spaces. Same physical coordinates, same timestamp, two entirely different realities.
It's fascinating, really.
It is. And today we are exploring why both of those realities are physically, neurologically, and systemically true. And, more importantly, how you are actively constructing the one you live in. So welcome back to our deep dive. This one is entirely custom tailored for you, the learner.
We are definitely crossing a major threshold with this one. For those who audited the initial source material with us in part one, we spent our time analyzing the foundational mechanics of the self.
Yeah, the baseline stuff.
Exactly. We broke down the architecture of personal identity, the neuroplasticity required to clean out your mental feed, and, the physiological necessity of embodiment.
Right, getting back into the body.
Yeah. The goal was to become the conscious architect of your own meaning, overriding those default settings you inherited from your environment.
So we established the baseline. We built the instrument, basically.
Yeah.
But here is the massive paradigm shift introduced in chapters 10 and 11, which are titled The Co-Creation and the Force Within.
The pivot.
The pivot, right. The source material shifts from the isolated individual architect building a static structure to this realization that, well, this structure exists within a vast living ecosystem.
It's alive.
Right. The mission today is to figure out what actually happens when you stop trying to frantically conduct the orchestra, step down from the podium, and just let the music play through you. Okay, let's unpack this.
That's a big shift.
Huge. Because transitioning from an architect who demands control over every single nail and blueprint to a participant who surrenders to the flow of a larger network, that feels deeply counterintuitive to everything we are taught. We are essentially attacking the me versus the world narrative here.
We have to attack it, though, because that narrative is just physically and biologically inaccurate.
How so?
Well, Western culture is largely built on this Cartesian split. The idea that the mind is separate from the body and the individual is completely separate from the environment.
Right, the brain in a jar concept.
Exactly. We're conditioned to view ourselves as closed systems, like you are just a brain inside a bone mech suit, battling the universe to extract whatever resources you can.
Just a deeply combative stance.
Inherently combative. But modern systems theory, thermodynamics, and obviously the source material, they all point to the exact same reality. There is literally no such thing as a closed system in biology.
None at all.
Right. Every thought you generate, every cortisol spike, every shift in your neurochemistry, it is constantly exchanging data and energy with the environment. You are a node in a living network. You're continuously broadcasting and receiving.
Which brings us to this brilliant, highly mechanical metaphor from the text about how we actually interface with this network.
The computer analogy.
Yeah, I love this one. Think of your conscious mind as a computer system.
Mhm.
Most of us spend, 95% of our waking lives staring at the desktop icons of our brain.
The user interface.
The UI, exactly. Your grocery list, the anxiety about a deadline, that little dopamine hit from a social media notification, or the looping memory of an argument you had 3 years ago.
All surface level stuff.
Completely surface-level graphic interface. We spend virtually zero time looking at the kernel, the actual operating system executing the code underneath.
Almost never.
But my pushback on the text here is really practical. The UI is engineered by a multi-billion-dollar attention economy to be utterly inescapable.
Oh, absolutely. It's designed to trap you.
Right. So if the interface is designed to hijack our neurochemistry, how on earth are we supposed to open the terminal and access the operating system?
Well, the mechanism to bypass the UI is what the text calls embodied disruption. And it relies entirely on the architecture of your autonomic nervous system.
So it's a hardware solution.
Precisely. When you live entirely in the cognitive layer, analyzing, worrying, projecting, you are highly susceptible to the interface. The external algorithms, whether it's, a 24-hour news cycle or a corporate hierarchy, they ping your amygdala.
They send a threat signal.
Right. They initiate an API call to your system that basically says, generate fear, allocate all resources to defense.
which keeps you trapped in the UI.
Exactly. But embodiment acts as a hardware override. When you deliberately ground your awareness in somatic sensation, like the feeling of gravity pulling you into the chair or the expansion of your diaphragm during a deep breath, you stimulate the vagus nerve.
Right, so you're actually physically engaging the parasympathetic nervous system to terminate that external API call.
That is exactly the mechanic at play. The external feed is screaming urgency, demanding a sympathetic fight-or-flight response. But your body, grounded in the present coordinate of space and time, sends a superseding signal to the brain.
It says, fine.
It says, we are physically safe, the heart rate is stable, the threat on the screen is a simulation, it's not a biological reality.
Wow, the body overrules the algorithm.
It does, and it is only when that local hardware is regulated that you actually have the bandwidth to perceive the subtler data streams of the broader ecosystem. I mean, you cannot download the operating system updates if your CPU is maxed out running malware in the UI.
That makes perfect sense. But I want to challenge what happens immediately after someone successfully regulates that hardware. Because human nature is incredibly predictable here.
Oh, for sure.
The second someone sitting there listening to this realizes, wow, I am connected to a deeper network, I can downregulate my panic and tap into this broader ecosystem. The immediate capitalist hyper-rationalist instinct is weaponization.
Oh, 100%. The hacking mindset.
Exactly. We think, give me the root access, let me write a script to force this network to give me a promotion, a perfect relationship, and a front row parking spot by next Tuesday. We want to become the tyrant of the network.
It's the illusion of unilateral control. And the text explicitly targets this as the force it approach. We treat a complex, non-linear living ecosystem like a simple vending machine.
Insert coin, get reward.
Right, and the force it approach is characterized by an absolute obsession with localized outcomes. You attempt to control every single variable, and when the system doesn't respond on your rigid artificial timeline, what do? You introduce more friction. You push harder.
Let's use a systems-based analogy here. Forcing an outcome in a complex network is like trying to download an entire season of a TV show on a 1990s dial-up internet connection and getting furiously angry that it's buffering.
Just screaming at the monitor.
Right. You're trying to rewrite the rules of a video game physics engine using the wrong coding language while the game is actively running. You're typing furiously, hitting enter, getting syntax errors, and the character is still just running into a brick wall.
It generates massive thermal output.
Heat, friction, exhaustion, but zero forward momentum. And in the human body, that thermal output is chronic stress. It's a tight jaw, it's shallow chest breathing, and complete systemic burnout.
And that exhaustion is the diagnostic metric. If you are chronically exhausted, you are using the force it approach. You are trying to push the river.
Which never works.
No. So the text introduces a cybernetic framework as an alternative, which it frames as the farmer's algorithm.
The farmer's algorithm.
Yeah, and the metaphor is very deliberate. A farmer operates within a complex biological system. They understand that localized control is impossible. I mean, you cannot scream at a seed to alter its metabolic rate.
Grow faster. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Right. Instead, the farmer optimizes the feedback loops.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of this algorithm because it is essentially a blueprint for resource allocation. Step 1 is prepare the soil. In a network, this means optimizing the environment for the probability of success.
It is systemic preparation. You must remove the toxic runoff and enrich the base layer. In practical terms, this requires auditing your environment. Are you surrounded by individuals who completely dysregulate your nervous system?
The energy vampires.
Exactly. Are you consuming data that increases your cognitive load without providing any actual utility? Preparing the soil is the ruthless elimination of friction in your immediate network so that energy can be conserved for actual growth.
Step 2 is plant the seed. And this is where the text separates itself from, like passive, wishful thinking philosophies. You still have to execute the physical action.
Absolutely. The network requires an input to generate an output. If you want a specific career trajectory, you must acquire the skills and submit the application.
You can't just meditate on a couch and expect a job offer.
Right. You have to introduce the new variable into the system. The seed must make contact with the soil.
But step 3 is where the modern professional completely short circuits. 10 the conditions. You iterate, You apply feedback, you remove new obstacles, but you completely detach your internal state from the immediate metric of success.
And detachment from the outcome is not apathy, which is what a lot of people think. It is strategic biological conservation.
That's a great way to put it.
If your baseline emotional regulation is entirely dependent on an external variable, like, say, whether a client signs a contract on a specific Tuesday, you have outsourced your nervous system to a chaotic network you do not control.
You're just a hostage to their inbox.
Exactly. Tending the conditions means you focus 100% of your energy on the process, the daily execution, the form of your swing.
Which naturally feeds into step 4. Trust the season. You are operating within macro cycles. The economy has seasons, industries have seasons, human relationships have seasons.
You cannot force a harvest in the middle of winter just because your quarterly projections demand it.
Right. The spreadsheet says we need apples in January, but the tree says no.
The tree doesn't care about your spreadsheet. When you shift from forcing to the farmer's algorithm, your physical relationship with reality completely changes. We move from the hydrodynamics of swimming upstream against a violent current to the fluid intelligence of water moving around a rock.
I love that image.
Water does not possess an ego. It encounters a massive boulder, and it does not expend energy trying to shatter the rock through brute force. It immediately maps the path of least resistance, redistributes its flow, and just continues moving.
And paradoxically, over a long enough timeline, that continuous frictionless flow will carve a canyon right through the rock.
Exactly. Fluid intelligence versus crystallized resistance.
Now, when you transition your operating system to this fluid state, the text makes a very bold claim. It says the network begins to respond with highly improbable data points. Coincidences multiply. But let's apply some real rigor here, because if someone tells me they stopped forcing their career, started flowing, and suddenly met the CEO of their dream company at a random coffee shop, my rationalist alarm bells are ringing loud.
Oh, they should be.
Right. Like, how much of this is just the human brain desperately seeking patterns in random static? Is synchronicity just a coping mechanism for a chaotic universe?
That skepticism is highly necessary. If we define synchronicity as magic, we lose the thread entirely. The text grounds synchronicity strictly in neurology and information processing. It redefines synchronicity as resonance and hyper-advanced pattern recognition. We have to look at the bandwidth of human consciousness to really understand the mechanism here.
Okay, let's look at the data on that.
Yeah.
Because the text uses this processing power analogy that is wild. The conscious mind, the part of you that speaks, plans, and thinks of itself as I, is processing roughly 40 bits of information per second.
It's tiny.
It is effectively a dial-up connection. It's incredibly slow and highly constrained, which is why working memory can only hold about, 7 items at a time?
Right, 7 plus or minus 2. Contrast that with your unconscious processing, your entire sensory apparatus, your peripheral vision, your somatosensory cortex, your auditory processing, all the neuroreceptors in your gut. That system is taking in approximately 11 million bits of information per second.
11 million versus 40.
11 million versus 40.
So the conscious mind is essentially a CEO sitting up in a penthouse office, receiving a highly redacted one-page executive summary once a day. Meanwhile, the subconscious is this massive multinational corporation with millions of employees gathering real-time data from every corner of the globe.
That is exactly what's happening. And the gatekeeper between those 11 million bits and the 40-bit executive summary is a network of neurons at the base of your brainstem. It's called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS, okay, how does that work?
The RAS is a filter. If the CEO had to process 11 million bits of data per second, the system would immediately crash.
Complete sensory overload.
Right. So the RAS filters out 10,999,960 bits of data as irrelevant background noise and only lets through the data that matches the parameters the CEO has deemed important.
Ah, and this is the Japanese city pop phenomenon from the text.
Yes, the perfect example.
So if you tell your CEO, hey, we need to care about 1980s Japanese city pop music, the CEO updates the parameters of the RAS. And suddenly, out of the 11 million bits of data constantly hitting your sensors, the RAS allows the sound of a specific bass line in a coffee shop to pass through to your conscious awareness.
You start noticing it everywhere.
Right. You notice an obscure magazine cover on a newsstand. The universe did not magically spawn Japanese city pop into your reality. The data was always rendering in the background. You just finally updated your API to query for it.
Precisely. Synchronicity is not the universe bending to your will. Synchronicity is your 11 million bit sensory apparatus, identifying a complex pattern in the external network that perfectly matches an internal intention, and sending a highly compressed signal, like a gut feeling or a sudden realization, up to your 40-bit conscious mind.
You aren't manifesting the opportunity.
No, your RAS is just finally allowing you to perceive the opportunity that was literally already sitting in the room.
But I'd push that even further when it comes to the most difficult concept in this section. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I noticed a cool band, but what about redirection synchronicity?
Slam doors.
Yeah, it's very easy to accept that your brain found a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
But what about when a door violently slams in your face? The project you prepped months for goes to someone else. The relationship you invested years into abruptly ends.
It hurts.
It hurts immensely. The 40-bit conscious mind perceives this as a catastrophic system failure. It generates immense grief and anger. How does the text justify a slammed door as alignment?
It comes down to predictive coding errors. Your 40-bit conscious mind had built a highly specific predictive model. If I get this job, I will be safe and successful. When the job falls through, the model shatters, which causes profound psychological pain. But remember the 11 million bit processor.
Right, the vast background network.
For the last 6 months, your subconscious has been processing the micro-expressions of the toxic hiring manager. It's been analyzing the subtle systemic dysfunctions in the company's communication. It registered the physiological stress response your body mounted every single time you entered their building.
Oh, wow. So the corporation knew the merger was a disaster long before the CEO read the memo.
Exactly the dynamic at play. Redirection is often your broader 11 million bit intelligence operating in concert with the feedback loops of the environment, protecting the system from a path that would cause long-term degradation.
It's saving you from yourself.
The 40-bit ego wanted the prestige of the job, but the deeper operating system recognized a fundamental misalignment and orchestrated, or at least accepted, the exit. True trust in the network requires accepting that the slammed door is actually a highly efficient course correction.
Which brings us perfectly to the concept of alignment in Chapter 11. And look, we need to rescue this word from middle management corporate speak.
Please.
Alignment isn't about getting your team to blindly agree with your KPIs. The text breaks true alignment down into 3 rigorously defined layers. Layer 1 is self. Internal coherence.
Think of it in terms of physics, specifically the difference between an incandescent light bulb and a laser.
Okay.
An incandescent bulb emits a massive amount of energy, but the light waves are incoherent. They scatter in every possible direction, basically canceling each other out. That's why it only lights up a small room and generates a ton of wasted heat. A laser, on the other hand, emits light waves that are perfectly coherent. They travel in the exact same phase and direction.
And that concentrated coherence can cut through solid steel.
Exactly. So internal coherence means your thoughts, your physiological state, and your actions are all phase aligned. If your conscious mind is saying, I want this promotion, but your nervous system associates visibility with trauma, and your daily habits are geared toward procrastination.
You are the incandescent bulb.
You are the bulb. You are scattering energy in 3 wildly conflicting directions. You will generate immense internal heat, which we experience as anxiety, but 0 forward momentum.
And you cannot fake biological coherence, the nervous system always knows. But the second layer is alignment with reality, and the text includes a crucial anti-manifestation clause here, which acts as a massive reality check against toxic positivity.
Yes, the physics engine.
I love this clause because you cannot code against the fundamental physics engine of the universe. If the game has gravity, alignment does not mean standing at the bottom of a cliff, closing your eyes, and vibrating at the frequency of a bird until you magically float to the top.
That's just delusion.
Right. Alignment is acknowledging the friction, accepting the physical reality of the cliff, and using your energy to build a ladder. If it is pouring rain outside, alignment isn't screaming at the sky demanding the sun to come out. Alignment is putting on a raincoat.
It is an objective engagement with the terrain. You do not argue with the data the environment presents, you adapt to it. And that is what allows you to access the third layer, alignment with the field.
The unseen force.
Right. This is about sensing the macro timing. When you are internally coherent and objectively interacting with reality, you begin to sense the systemic momentum. You can feel if you are pushing a boulder uphill or if you are riding a wave of existing momentum.
And if we are fully aligned, the text presents a phenomenon that sounds, deeply philosophical but operates strictly psychologically. The universe as a mirror. Let's go back to the 2 travelers hook from the intro. We established that two people can walk down the same street and experience entirely different realities. The underlying mechanism there is top-down processing in the visual cortex.
Yes. We assume our eyes act like camera lenses, objectively recording the world and sending a raw video feed up to the brain. Neuroscience tells us that is entirely false. Vision is highly constructive.
It's an active build.
Completely. Your visual cortex actually sends more neural projections down to your eyes than your eyes send up to your brain.
Wait, really? More data flows down than up.
Yes, your brain is constantly projecting its internal expectations onto the environment, and it only uses incoming sensory input to correct major errors in the projection.
State dictates trait. If your internal state is highly dysregulated and anchored in fear, your brain literally projects a threat overlay onto the visual field. You construct the broken glass and the shadows because your internal algorithm is querying for danger.
It's looking for the threat.
But if your internal state is regulated and curious, you project a totally different overlay. You construct the street art and the bakery. The universe is a mirror because your internal broadcast literally dictates the parameters of the reality your brain is willing to render.
And this creates a self-reinforcing cybernetic loop. Think about Traveler A. Perceiving a hostile world, Traveler A adopts a defensive, closed-off posture.
Shoulders tense, avoiding eye contact.
Right. And the people on the streets subconsciously read that hostile micro-expression, and they respond with defensive hostility of their own. Traveler A's projection actively recruited the environment to validate their fear.
See? I knew it was dangerous.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Traveler B, projecting warmth, elicits warmth. You do not just passively observe reality, your internal state actively recruits the network to materialize the reality you expect.
Let's introduce another variable that shatters our default UI, time. The text argues that our standard perception of linear time is actually a cognitive illusion. We view time as a straight line moving left to right. The past is a locked file, the future is an empty folder, and we are just this little icon moving across the screen.
The standard timeline.
But the source material asks us to view time as a spiral.
Linear time is a very recent, highly localized human construct. It was mostly designed for industrial coordination, trained schedules, factory shifts.
Right.
If you look at dynamical systems theory, time behaves much more like a weather system. The currents of the past and the probabilities of the future are continuously swirling and interacting with your present coordinate.
We experience this physiologically all the time. If you have unresolved trauma, say, a trigger in your present environment can cause your body to flood with cortisol. Your nervous system is reacting to a threat from 1995 as if it is actively happening in 2026.
The body doesn't know the difference.
The past is not gone. It is a live current actively altering the chemical makeup of your present. Conversely, if you are terrified of a presentation you have to give next week, your body is mounting a stress response today. The anticipated future is reaching backward down the spiral and degrading your present hardware.
Time is folded. It really is. And when you drop the forcing mechanism and enter a state of deep alignment, what psychologists call a flow state, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for linear time perception, literally downregulates. It's called transient hypofrontality.
Transient hypofrontality. That is the scientific term for the feeling of timelessness.
Exactly.
Like when you are so engaged in a task that 6 hours pass in what feels like 10 minutes. Or you meet someone and feel an instantaneous, non-linear recognition. You have stepped out of the 40-bit linear processing unit and tapped into the deeper currents of the spiral.
You're riding the current.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We are at the climax of Chapter 11. If this force is everywhere, if time is a swirling spiral, and if our internal coherence is constantly recruiting the external network to mirror our state, where exactly is the boundary between us and the universe? What is the actual firewall between the internal and the external?
To answer that, the text forces us to define the unseen force in very practical terms. It uses the metaphor of the electricity running through a smartphone.
Okay, let's track that.
When you are completely engrossed in the interface, you are looking at the pixels, the apps, the data structures. You never think about the raw electrical current powering the device. The electricity doesn't have a logo. It doesn't have a shape. It is entirely invisible.
But without it, the most advanced hardware in the world is just a dead arrangement of silicon and glass.
Exactly. The force is that fundamental aliveness. It is the raw animating current of the network. And that leads to a concept that completely dismantles the firewall between the self and the universe. The text states, "You are not a wave fighting to get to the shore. You are the ocean, momentarily waving."
You are the ocean momentarily waving. I mean, wow.
We have to look at the biology of this to prove it's not just poetry. Every 7 to 10 years, virtually every single cell in your physical body is
A
replaced.
complete cellular turnover.
The carbon, the hydrogen, the oxygen, it is all cycled out and replaced by matter from the environment. You are not a static object. You are a localized pattern that energy and matter are temporarily flowing through.
I want to break down why this is the ultimate antidote to human suffering. Because if you identify exclusively as the wave, which is exactly how the ego operates, your entire existence is anchored in terror.
Constant fear.
If I am a separate, isolated wave, I am inherently fragile. I have to compete with all the other waves for resources. I am terrified of the wind. And above all, I am paralyzed by the shore. Because the crash on the shore represents the total annihilation of my identity. It is the absolute end of me.
It is a closed system mentality that mathematically guarantees existential dread. There's no escaping it if you're just the wave.
But if you update the operating system to understand that you are the ocean, and this current human lifespan, this personality, this body, is just a temporary, localized shape the ocean is taking, the physics of your reality fundamentally change.
The stakes change.
The crash on the shore isn't a death to be feared. It is simply a transition of state. It is water folding back into water. It completely neutralizes the fear of destruction because you realize you are made of the very thing you thought you were fighting.
And the text defines the integration of this concept as mastery, or dual consciousness. Because, we should point out, the danger of non-dual philosophy is nihilism.
Right. Nothing matters.
Exactly. If I'm just the ocean, why should I care about my job, my mortgage, or my relationships? Why not just sit on a mountain and dissolve?
You can't ignore the physics engine of the local server. You still have to pay rent.
Exactly. Mastery requires you to simultaneously hold two operational states. You fiercely honor the wave, you respect the parameters of the local rendering, you pay your bills, you set interpersonal boundaries, you engage in the friction of human relationships, and you allow yourself to process grief and joy because those are the authentic data outputs of your current form.
You play your specific note in the symphony. You don't pretend the note doesn't exist.
Beautifully put. But while you play that note, you continuously rest your awareness in the ocean. You maintain the background processing that this localized identity is temporary, that the rigid boundaries of the ego are basically an optical illusion, and that you are fundamentally composed of an infinite self-organizing intelligence.
You are the localized rendering, animated by the infinite server.
Living as the localized while resting in the infinite.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, as we synthesize this entire deep dive? Think about the evolution of your operating system. You started as a user, trapped in the UI, letting the external algorithms completely dictate your neurochemistry. In part one, you became an architect, rewriting your cognitive baseline and establishing physical embodiment. And now, you are a participant. You have stopped trying to brute force the network, and you have actually begun to co-create with the systemic momentum.
And the practical yield of this evolution is a radical decrease in friction. When you stop perceiving the environment as a hostile antagonist, your physiological stress load plummets.
The exhaustion fades.
Right. When a project fails or a door slams, you no longer process it as a personal attack on your identity. You process it as the system redirecting your flow. The paradigm permanently shifts from the victimhood of life happens to me to the integrated power of life happens through me.
I want to leave you with a visceral scenario to anchor this. Imagine it is 3:00 a.m. You are sitting in the quiet of your home. The interface is turned off. No screens, no demands. The fridge is just humming in the background, and your heart is beating in your chest, pumping blood through thousands of miles of vessels, executing millions of complex biochemical equations every single second, entirely without your conscious permission or effort.
Doing it all for you.
You have spent your life trying to control every variable, but you've built the vessel, you've tuned your instrument. The only question left is, are you finally willing to step down from the podium, let go of the baton, and simply let the music play through you?
You step out of the illusion of the conductor, and you realize you were the music all along.
Take just one conceptual upgrade from our time today. Maybe it's implementing the farmer's algorithm to stop forcing a specific outcome. Maybe it's recognizing the Japanese city pop phenomenon and intentionally tuning your reticular activating system. Or maybe it's just sitting with the profound biological reality that you are the ocean, momentarily waving. Install one of these into your operating system today and watch how the network responds. Until our next deep dive.